But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Be kind to the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste, a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, banking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. And we've got an interesting selection of bullshit for you this week, I think. But there was also a video that I wanted to recommend. Not gonna watch it because it's long. It's long, but it is worth it. It's one of those. Let me see if I can... I have to pull up the link here. There it is. Hey Erica, how you doing? Okay, this is a video by a channel I only recently heard about. I actually recommended something of his last week as well. This one is just an absolute banger of a video on the weaponization of anti-Semitism and Zionism and Zionism's extremely dodgy relationship with anti-Semitism. And it is rare that I find that somebody's done something on this where that basically covers all of the sort of ground that I would want to see covered. He's done an amazing job there, and I just highly recommend it. Oh. Well, good night then. So, just definitely worth checking out. It is divided into chapters. It is long, but I mean, it's like worthy of its length. We've also got some other, and we've got our usual assholes, and actually a new asshole. I had become aware of a channel called TravelingIsrael.com, and holy shit. I figured that it was just going to be like some sort of touristy bullshit. Hey, River Rune, just, hey, go check out, go to Tel Aviv Pride and get rocks chucked at you by religious fanatics and fascists. Go swimming at Eilat and try not to think about what's going on in Gaza or something like that. No. This guy is just straight up. It's just straight up, fucked up Zionist propaganda. And there are a few videos by him that seem worth checking out. Also got Xanderhole claiming that Biden and Kamala are the most pro-union administration ever. Certainly the most pro-union administration ever to have busted the railway unions. Then we've got PragerU. They're looking out for us. Dennis Prager is worried that the left cares more about race than class. He's gonna do a Ben Burgess on us, I think. So he wants to fucking Dennis Prager is going to try to get us on the straight and narrow of materialist class analysis, clearly. I mean, he couldn't possibly have ulterior motives for why he'd be critiquing the left's attitude towards class. Oh, well, they did. There was going to be that huge strike, and Biden used the Railway Labor Act to force them instead to accept a deal that they had already rejected as totally unacceptable. I would call that union busting. And then we've also got another one. I mean, again, PragerU is really worried about the working class. This is called Work to Live or Live to Work. And I'm sure it's about to explain to us about alienation and the commodity form's role in making work suck and why we need communism. Well, yeah, they still exist. But I mean, the most important thing they could possibly have done, they were immediately thwarted in that. I mean, it's one thing, you have a union, but if it goes on strike, the government immediately just sort of shuts it down. At that point, the union kind of only exists on paper, unless they just refuse to acknowledge that. Then we've got Tim Pool, DOJ Chief of Public Affairs, admits Trump indictments are pervasion of justice. And I don't think Tim knows what pervasion means. I think that he possibly is not familiar with the concept of pervading. And then we've got Caleb Maupin, who wants us to not be normal. Oh, and we got link spam moving up in the world. Like, where am I fucking... Block. Where are my mod tools that I can't get that thing and get rid of that thing? Well, yes, that's true. Okay, is there any way I can get that... Yeah, we're getting rid of there. There we go. Well, yes, they can certainly serve that purpose still, and indeed, the fact that they did not immediately just go wildcat and say, try and stop us, does suggest that the union bureaucracy has managed to maintain that role. But in terms of the ability of the union to do to act in the interest of workers, you couldn't exactly say that their effectiveness is at the same level as on the eve of the breaking of the strike. And then we've got another one. And I had heard some things about this video. This is actually by Jessie Gender, who I haven't watched much of her stuff, but I mean, what I've seen, it's been pretty good usually. But I had heard that she'd like relied on a really dodgy outfit from Britain called the Alliance for Workers' Liberty in doing this video on anti-Semitism, and so that was another one I was thinking of checking out. Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, I don't think that anyone would get pussy in a spelling bee. I mean, that would be a really easy spelling bee. Maybe, I don't know, maybe like a primary school spelling bee? Well, they were at the very well, I don't know. If they had actually been able to strike, I think that would have been massively in the interest of the workers. And not just railway workers, that would have had a huge knock-on effect. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple here. I'm kind of curious as well about... Hassan Abi made a video about me. Free Palestine? No thanks, from travelingisrael.com. But, yeah. Let's start out... Have a look at this. Oh, I mean, the thumbnail says Zionism isn't fascism, it's more. I mean, okay. That could be read a lot of different ways. But okay, let's start out with this one. Let's see where this is going. I want to see just how much AWL gets relied on, because fucking hell, it's a 4-hour video? Okay. Let's see what the sections are. How anti-Semitism... The history of Zionism. Zionism as a political ideology. Anti-Semitism on the left. That, okay. Those are the bits that I'll be interested in. Zionism as an emotion. Like, what the fuck? Shut up. That's kinda no. Okay, so I'm skipping ahead. Yeah, I had heard this, and... So, okay, we're going to start out on the section that...
Is itself anti-Semitic, and done to obfuscate goals are not exist at all within leftist movements. These are all enabled by both intentional and unconscious conflation of Zionism and Judaism. As a result of these intentionally, emotionally charged, and politically motivated defamations, it is relatively easy to leave the discussion of leftist anti-Semitism primarily on the level of combating these bad faith attacks.
Yeah, well, which is actually precisely what that is really the main level that it should be on, because there. Let's just get this out there. There is anti-Semitism in left spaces, because reactionary assholes will often try to get into left spaces, and there are dickheads who will open the door for them on the idea that there should be a big tent or something like that. But leftist anti-Semitism is an incoherent concept. Well, I've skipped over like 3/4 of it. So, okay.
Typically, the response to these large-scale propagandistic smear campaigns of leftist groups is usually met with a mixture of several responses. The first is to deny that anti-Semitism exists at all within leftist movements, or, more accurately, that the group's goals are not anti-Semitic, which is typically the case. Most leftists...
What do you mean, typically?
Defending themselves from these smears will point out what I did at the top of this video, that conflating criticism of Israel and Zionism with all of Judaism is itself anti-Semitic.
Okay, she's right here so far.
Done to obfuscate and distract from the actual message and the violence being done by Israel against Palestinians. Often, many leftists will point to Jewish individuals and groups...
Hola, Oscar, ¿cómo está, Ivo? ¿Cuánto tiempo?
Who are within leftist movements to underscore how Jewishness is not inherently Zionist and to critique Israel is not inherently anti-Semitic. And
and what's your problem with this?
If there is an acknowledgement of anti-Semitism, it's usually directed at specific individuals who we need...
Yeah, correctly.
...to weed out from the movement and remove from leftist organizing.
Yeah.
And all of these responses are understandable and actually necessary.
And...
absolutely should point out that accusations of anti-Semitism are typically done by the powerful used to intentionally smear leftist movements who are threatening their power.
Yes.
We should also acknowledge our Jewish comrades working to push back against Israeli policy and Zionism. Yet these responses don't recognize the whole picture and can create some issues of their own if done in isolation. As these false accusations of anti-Semitism make it challenging to accurately measure the extent of anti-Semitism on the left...
Well... See, I don't know about that. I mean, it's true, the people who are making these accusations and who will often be the same people who are providing a lot of the anti-Semitism statistics. If you speak German, I'm doing a series on a group like this. They do actually do a good job of making it really difficult to actually figure out how much actual anti-Semitism is going on because of so much bullshit. But... Stalinism, especially late period Stalinism, was anti-Semitic as fuck. Now, whether we would call Stalin the left, I mean, that it's such an amorphous term. I mean, first you have to define it. Estamos viviendo en el capitalismo, ¿no? Es una mierda. Yo también estoy la caga.
It is perhaps much better to then educate how anti-Semitism can form within leftist rhetoric, by either denying that anti-Semitism exists at all, or by placing anti-Semitism as the work of individuals or specific groups that can be removed from leftist groups.
But that is, I mean, as somebody who has actually played, I would have to say, not entirely a small role in dealing with anti-Semitism, like anti-Semitic people and groups that have tried to weasel their way into like the Palestinian solidarity movement in the U.S. and Britain, I have to say, and have like actually ended up being like personally smeared by fairly prominent people as a result of it. I have to say that is literally an accurate description that she is pushing back against.
It limits the ability for us to acknowledge the possibility that anti-Semitism is often much more pervasive an issue than simply overt Jewish hatred, or something that can be isolated within individuals or groups. As pointed out in our earlier discussion on the history of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism is typically not so direct, but instead works to make itself invisible and redirect anger at systems and institutions of power towards Jewish people specifically. Given this, and given the fact that leftist organizing often works to call out systems and institutions of control, it is not so surprising then that anti-Semitism can find itself inside leftist rhetoric.
Wait, I mean, actually, you just explained precisely why anti-Semitism is less likely, because if we're calling out specifically the systems, rather than trying to redirect the anger towards some like specific scapegoat group of people or something like that, that would seem to actually be a bit of a contradiction, really.
Anti-Semitism is sometimes called the socialism of fools by leftists for this very reason. Much of leftist discourse comes in the form of anti-capitalism, for obvious reasons. However, to discuss capitalism properly and why it's a problem, one must rigorously examine the systems of exploitation and private ownership that make up capitalism. While this is often the starting point of most leftist organizing, its general sentiments can be easily co-opted if not made specific.
Well, yes, but that's not the same thing as saying, okay, yeah, that is true. There are all sorts of points of contact where somebody, if they wanted to twist something and try to take it into a fascist direction, they could. There's kind of always that, and there are pretty much always fascists trying to do that.
Take, for example, the Occupy Wall Street movement of 2008.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, that was an area where fasc actually, a lot of, like, the big fasc these days, I mean, like, pricks like Tim Pool, for example, got their start, was around Occupy. Actually, our little guy, Caleb, also famously tried to give a speech at Occupy Wall Street, filmed himself being completely ignored by all present, and put it up on his YouTube channel for nobody knows why.
Occupy Wall Street was typically portrayed by mainstream media, both conservative and liberal, as a failure, mainly due to its supposed lack of concrete demands and leaderless structure.
Here in the studio today is one of the leaders of Occupy Wall Street, Shelley Wexler. Shelley,
it's good to be here, but I'm not one of the leaders of OWS. We don't have leaders.
Is that a good idea?
Not having leaders?
Yeah.
Yes, because this way everyone should have a voice.
Sounds like a lot of people talking at once, but tell us in a few words what OWS is protesting.
We're protesting a variety of issues. The co-op...
This is fictional television here. This is not an actual, like, this isn't a great example.
Established presence of anti-Semitic populist ideas in political culture, with roots going back centuries, means that anti-Semitic answers to questions about the nature of social and economic power are always close at hand. The depth of this reservoir means that populist explanations about minority elites, often operating secretively to manipulate society to the...
Jesus, this is long. Yeah, actually... Yeah, Aaron Sorkin, too. Like, Seriously. I'm thinking actually maybe this is something to do a separate response to just because of how long it is. Because I feel like we're going to use up the entire hour and a half trying to find the main bits I would want to respond to. So I think we're going to move on and look at something else. Not pivoting too far away from the subject, this is Traveling Israel, who's going to explain why he, a Zionist, doesn't want a free Palestine.
Made a video about me. It is actually an almost 2-hour-long video that argues against me.
Okay, Riveroon, do yourself a favor and check out the video that I linked to, Anti-Semitism Weaponized by Rev and Reve. Absolutely. I mean, it isn't specifically a response. Have a good night, Eric. Always good to see you. It isn't specifically a response to this. In fact, it's actually from last year. But it does so much better on the subject. Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm always a little bit apprehensive when I hear somebody, like, somebody prominent, you know, like, some prominent bread tuber is gonna do something about anti-Semitism, and I haven't actually heard what they've had to say, you know, yet about Zionism, for example. Because there's so many ways that can get fucked up, and often does. Which is, again, why, the video that I recommended at the beginning, check that out. It's really fucking good. Rev and Reve does an amazing job. Like, I've seen 2 of his videos only. They're long, but they're worth it.
Me and the issues I explained in my video, Free Palestine, No Thanks. He is joined by a historian called Zachary Foster.
Who is actually a liberal Zionist, kind of. I mean, he's lately been doing this thing on Twitter where he's like, we should stop saying Zionism. And it's like, literally, so every once in a while, people, often, like, liberal Zionists will say this. And it's just such a nonsense take. Because the thing is, first of all, Zionism is a thing that has a name. You should, and we absolutely should be trying to change its brand identity. It has had far too good a brand identity for far too long. And we're actually in a moment where it can be flipped and more people, and it can actually be as negatively charged as it really ought to be as the racist dogshit ideology it is. So, like, trying to pivot away and say, no, we shouldn't be calling it Zionism at a time like this is, no matter what the intent behind it, is doing Zionism a favor.
The video was actually made a few months ago, and a large number of my followers have sent it to me. Anyway, the points he raised against me are still relevant today. I won't be showing it all because it is way too long, but I will share a link here.
Which is why we're not looking at the fucking Jesse Gender video. I mean, because it looks actually like, that looks like a thoughtful enough video that I would want to actually look at it at length. But I feel like I would not be able to do it justice in this, in an hour and a half responding spontaneously, because there's just so fucking much of it. I mean, that is a huge fucking video.
Here below, so you can watch the whole thing if you want to. I have no problem with people saying I'm wrong. However, I do have a problem with people calling me a racist and say
yeah, and if you look at the other videos in his channel, yeah, he's a fucking racist.
That I have been dehumanizing other people. So
I mean, he's got a video that looks like, I mean, the title, I haven't watched the video, but the title suggests that he's doing a very typical Zionist Holocaust denial thing, where yeah, they try to like shift the blame for the Holocaust onto the Mufti of Jerusalem, who was imposed on the Palestinians by the Brits. They had elected somebody else.
So, I will start with that.
He's just painting a picture that dehumanized Palestinians. This broader initiative among Zionists to dehumanize the Palestinian people. He's being incredibly bigoted towards Muslims. You know, I am deeply anti-Palestinian. I am super racist against Arabs and Muslims.
Don't call me names just because you can't prove me wrong, and because I won't comply with the rules of progressive political correctness. Do I make
yeah, see, that is a great way to refute accusations that you're racist. The minute, I mean, there's nothing that clears that up quite like saying, don't call me that just because I don't play by the rules of political correctness. Very old-timey that. He didn't even say woke.
Realizations? Yes, we all do. Both when we say good things about any group and when we criticize it. If I say that...
Actually, okay, this is the... I didn't realize that this was a response to a video about... We're getting off to... We're doing this one in fits and starts today. It's just been that kind of a fucking day. We had the plumbers in today because because the sink in the kitchen was dripping down onto where my computer is. Fortunately, that's all sorted, but it is not... Yeah, it's just made the day a little bit complicated. Let me see. Where is it? Where is Free Palestine? No thanks. Damn it. Ah, there we go. So we're about to watch him not being racist. That's what I've just heard. We're about to hear him not being. He's not going to play by the rules of political correctness. But this is him not being racist.
This video is going to be interesting, even if you have heard 1,000 different reports about the Israeli-Palestinian.
Sorry to hear that, Phoenix.
I promise you that this will give you a new perspective.
Oh, it's going to give us a new perspective. Like a new Free Palestine, no thanks perspective. It's not that tired old Zionist bullshit that you're used to. This is new Zionist bullshit.
I will be talking about the settlements, the occupation, the two-state solution, Islam, Jerusalem, the solution, and a whole lot more. Before I break down the Palestinian narrative, a small trigger warning. I like facts.
Oh, I can't wait to see. He likes facts. He likes facts. I can't wait to see what his relationship with facts is.
If you don't like what I'm saying, then bring me facts that contradict what I'm saying. If I say that Jerusalem is...
No, that is an Israeli accent, actually. That is what it sounds like. It is... the accent you get when you speak English as a native speaker of Hebrew pronounced with a German accent. That's what you get. He actually sounds a little bit like a French cooking French cooking video guy that I watch. Like vaguely French anyway.
Not mentioning the Quran, or that the Jews said yes to the partition plan in 1947.
Then you've already said two completely inaccurate statements. Also, what do you mean the Jews? Like most of the Jews didn't live there or have any say in the matter.
And the Arabs said no, or that there was no such thing as Palestinians in the 18th century.
Well, I mean, okay, those would not be. Those are examples of not facts. What's the word for those things?
Then feel free to prove me wrong. Send me a...
Yeah, I mean that's like the Zionists themselves talked about having how they would have to deal with the Palestinians all the way back in the early 20th century.
Link to a letter from a pilgrim to the land of Israel who says that he met a nice Palestinian. I'm asking you to challenge me. If you just write me that I'm Zionist or that I'm biased or that I've received money from the Israeli government to make this video. Those aren't actually arguments.
Well, I mean, the fact that you clearly are a Zionist, though, and yes, that is discrediting.
And for your information, I am completely against the current government of Israel.
Which means fuck all. I mean, that means absolutely nothing. Like, if you look at these protests in Israel, it's easy to get the idea. Some people, like liberal Zionists, will allow you to get this idea that actually those people are, like, against the genocide, and no. They are very specifically about getting the captives back out of Gaza. Like, the only reason they're on the street is that they haven't been brought back yet. If Israel had accepted them back and then resumed genociding Palestinians, which is the official position of Netanyahu and Biden and Harris, then they would not be protesting. They would have gotten what they wanted. These protests have absolutely nothing to do with what is being done to the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank.
The good thing about Israel is that, unlike most of the Arab Muslim countries, Israel is a democracy. I'm not afraid of the government preventing me from...
what's the deal with AWN? Oh, wow, he's not afraid of the government preventing him from expressing his thoughts. That's so funny, because, like, people... clearly, the government would have problems with his thoughts. I mean, he's going to show us. He's so totally anti-government. Like, the government is literally arresting people there. Not for sharing social media posts about what's being done to the Palestinians, but for looking at them. Literally for looking at them. A professor, a Palestinian citizen of Israel who's a professor at Hebrew University, actually got dragged away from her home and tortured for several days in jail because she had pointed out that there was no evidence for various atrocity myths that are spread about the 7th of October. This guy's bravado, I think, needs to be kept in perspective.
Expressing my thoughts. Israel is not Iran or Syria or Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Gaza, and I don't delete comments. Some people are 100% for Israel and some are 100% against it. I'm aiming for the middle ground.
Ooh, this is going to be good. He's aiming for the middle ground. That's how you know he can't possibly be racist. He's aiming for the middle ground on whether Palestinians are human beings with rights and should have any right to live in their homes.
If I get dislikes and smart comments, then I know that...
Oh, that's okay. That's very cool. Okay, that's great. I would love to, like, share their stuff then. Definitely.
Audience, but do give this video a like and subscribe.
Nope.
The last thing that I want to ask is this. Don't use bombastic language in your comments if you don't have the numbers to support it. Ethnic cleansing is a very powerful expression.
Ooh, it's always great when you start out with your video about how you're not racist and don't want, but you free Palestine, no thanks. Not that he's racist.
In 1948, there were around 700,000 Palestinians, and today there are 7 million in the land of Israel. You can't.
Okay, that's very cute. See what he's doing there? The reason he says the land of Israel is because, see, when Zionists use that, they're talking about all of the 1967 occupied territories. What he's doing there is a little Nakba denial. Because, okay, first of all, 700,000 is just, that isn't a correct number. Because 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly expelled from the 1948 territory, the area that's now called within the Green Line, that's within the Green Line, and there were still Palestinians left over. There were also, like, Palestinians, if you're going to say, you know, not just what is currently Israel, but also the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, there were Palestinians living there too. I mean, the reality is that Palestinians were more or less the majority until the Nakba happened. And then they were kicked out into the West Bank and Gaza over actually a period of several years, and to a certain extent it's still going on now. So what he's just doing, it's just a cute little statistical manipulation here.
really use this term. However, if you want to use the words ethnic cleansing, you can do so to describe what happened to the Jews in Arab countries.
Which is kind of funny because guess what colonial regime played a major role in making that in making the exodus of Jews from the of Arab Jews happen?
In Morocco in 1948, there were 265.
Like, I mean, Avi Shleim, who's an Iraqi Jewish Israeli historian, has written extensively because he was there at the time that this went down. And Israel played a major role in creating the climate of panic in which Iraqi Jews left. I mean, that was also, like, Baghdad, that's one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world, and Iraqi Jews were very big in the pan-Arab movement. I mean, Egypt is a neat example as well, because in Egypt, Mossad agents got caught in Alexandria plotting to blow up the synagogue there in order to start a panic in Egypt. In Yemen, Israel lured Yemeni Jews over with false promises about what kind of society they were building, and then did all sorts of fucked up shit to their children. Like, this is so fucked up.
1,000 Jews. Today there are around 2,000. In Iraq there were 135,000 Jews in 1948. Today there are fewer than 10. Algeria used to be home to 140,000 Jews. Today there are fewer than 50, and I can go on. It is Muslim countries who perpetrated ethnic cleansing on the Jews.
Like, this is such bullshit.
But this statement doesn't quite cover what has been happening. Muslims have been doing this to all minorities, not only...
Oh, not that he's racist or anything.
If you zoom out, you will see that 100 years ago, there were many Christian communities and other small ethnic groups in the Middle East. They are all being wiped out.
He's right. This is, like, from the past year, okay? No, let me just make absolutely certain. I think this is from the past year. At a time, 10 months ago, okay, at a time when Israel was carrying out massive pogroms specifically against Palestinian Christians. I mean, they still are. So, I mean, this is such cynical bullshit.
Muslims, for some reason, the Western world, the Christian world, doesn't want to talk about it. As a Jew, I care about what is going on with Jews all over the world, and I find it very odd that Christians don't really care about Nazareth or Bethlehem.
Who is it who is persecuting Christians in Nazareth and Bethlehem? I'm just wondering, like, who bombed Bethlehem a couple of months ago? See, that was Israel, my dude. Like, what like, the fucking... How is the lightning not striking you?
Which are kind of important to the followers of Jesus, and used to be 80% Christians 50 years ago, and now are 80% Muslims. The same goes for Christians.
Yeah, and what he did, this is a common Zionist talking point. And the reason that happened in those particular communities is they redrew the boundaries. So people living in the suburbs who had previously not been covered by, like, municipal services and the municipal budget, despite the fact that they were, for all intents and purposes, part of the town, were included. And by doing that, the ratio shifted.
In Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt. In Nigeria, Muslim organizations have murdered thousands of Christians. 2 million Christians have fled Iraq and become refugees in that.
Oh, I wonder what was going on in Iraq that has led to so many people fleeing the place. I wonder if anyone, like, it's almost like somebody invaded the place and, like, just wrecked everything.
The last 2 decades, but no one seems to care about them.
How many of those Iraqi refugees has Israel taken it?
Yeah, nor the universities. Everyone is obsessed with the Palestinian refugees. Did you know that the UN has 2 agencies for refugees? One for hundreds of millions of refugees all over the world, and another one called UNRWA, which is only for the most privileged refugees on earth, the Palestinians.
Oh yeah, the most privileged refugees on earth. Yeah, ask the people in Gaza how privileged they're feeling. Like, oh, I know where he's going with this bullshit.
Don't just take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. So let's talk about the story the Palestinians like to tell and the media like to repeat. The Palestinians lived in Palestine for hundreds of years.
That's the story they like. I mean, like, literally. Okay, that he's just claiming this is the Palestinian narrative. This is not even controversial outside of the Zionist propaganda cinematic universe.
They lived peacefully alongside a small Jewish minority until the rise of
Hey, Toriel.
a colonialist movement which, under the umbrella of the European imperial powers, started kicking the Palestinians out of their land and homes.
Yeah, okay, so what you're saying is that the Palestinians like to rely on the facts, and that is what makes them so privileged, because they're so privileged because when they talk about the shit that happened to them, they don't have to make shit up. And it's worth noting that what he's describing is actually what Palestinian Jews say too, which is why Palestinian Jews were not happy about Zionists, because they actually had pretty good relations with their Muslim and Christian neighbors for centuries, and then Zionists showed up and fucked everything up. They're still not fans of
Following
Zionism.
the current situation. And now for the facts. In the long history of the land of Israel, there was never such a thing as a Palestinian people until the 20th century. Millions of pilgrims.
Yeah, notice, like, he just sort of throws that in, the long history of the land of Israel. The long history, there are bottles of whiskey out there that are older than your fucking regime.
Come to the land of Israel over the last 3,000 years. They've come across Jews, Arab, Christians, Muslims, Druze, Turks. They've never met a Palestinian.
Well, that's so weird. So you're saying that there were people in Palestine, but there were no Palestinians based on what exactly? It sounds like maybe those are the Palestinians that you're talking about. See, this is a thing that Israel likes to do. I mean, it's a thing that a lot of racist colonial regimes like to do. They sort of divide the colonized population into the smallest possible groups. Germany did it in Poland. South Africa, the apartheid regime did it as well, which is why they had Bantustans for like every single linguistic group of the indigenous population, rather than just one big one for the entire indigenous population, in order to keep them separate and keep them divided and be able to control them better. And Israel does this too. The race laws don't just say, you know, Jews and Palestinians. It's, you have like multiple groups all divided up, and they have different sets of, their legal status is different in order to try to turn them against each other and shit.
Now you might say, regardless of whether they have existed as a nation, all people should enjoy human rights, and all people should have the right to identify themselves as they wish.
Even if it means using facts.
And I agree.
Ooh, wow, that's so big of him. He agrees.
To identify yourself however you like, but you don't have the right to reinvent history.
Well, that's kind of a problem for you, I mean, because like the stuff that the lies he's told, particularly about the situation of the Palestinians on the eve of Zionist colonization, aren't even, like, Israeli historians have written heavily about that. That is not controversial. Like, there's one book that you can use that claims to back him up on this. It's called From Time Immemorial. And the thing about From Time Immemorial by Joan Peters is it is literally a hoax. Like, the footnotes are, if you actually read the sources, they say the exact opposite of what she quotes them as saying, in order to support this bullshit narrative. even like mainstream Israeli historians, like Zionist historians, right-wing Zionist historians, acknowledge that Palestinians existed, because you would have to, there's just way too much evidence. You couldn't be taken seriously as a historian if you didn't. They say fucked up shit about what should have happened to them, but they do acknowledge they existed. This is a really stale propaganda line, and one that is actually quite recent. Like, if you go back and read the Zionist press in the early 20th century, I mean, first of all, like, you'll get nosebleeds. It's, the Zionist press in any age sucks. But they talk openly about how how they're going to have to reach some sort of arrangement with the Palestinians in one way or another. Like, that is an openly discussed thing.
And the history of the region is very clear. This is documented.
Yeah, terra nullius. Yeah, like colonizers do this all over the place. I mean, they did that in Australia, and you have you have people like Fernando Villegas, who likes to pretend that there's no such thing as a Mapuche. I mean, that is just such a standard fucking thing. Everybody does it. Or in Argentina, esos facho culiao que dicen, that actually there's no such thing as a Mapuche. It's all a British conspiracy to take over Patagonia or some shit.
Piece of land on the planet. There is a very good book, a very ancient and popular book about the connections of the Jews to Judea. It is called the Bible.
Oh wow! I mean, we're gonna use mythology. I mean, and the fucked up thing about this is actually if you count up, like if you take the biblical account, which is actually on the long side compared to the archaeological account, what you come to is that Jews were dominant on part of the land of historic Palestine for a couple of hundred years. Up to 500, I think it is. Which is to say, for the entire rest of our history, we were elsewhere. Like, other people were living there.
No, wait. I know what you are thinking. He's going to say that God gave this land to the Jews. And no, if you believe that God gave this land to the Jews, great. And if not, also great.
Wow, then why the fuck did you bring it up? Because that's not a serious, historical account. I mean, it's got fucking talking snakes and people, setting up studio apartments in the guts of whales, motherfucker. So if you're saying you don't care whether somebody takes this as an accurate claim, as source of a claim to title to land in the modern day, then why the fuck are you bringing it up?
The undeniable point is that there is a strong connection between the Jews and the land of Israel. There are thousands of books from the last 3,000 years that write about Jews and the land of Israel. And in archaeological digs...
Which, it's really kind of interesting what Israel does with archaeology. Because they have a different sort of approach to archaeology. Because they don't want to look at the top layers. Because if you look at the top layers, you get the roughly 2,000 years of Palestinian history. And they don't want to have evidence of the Palestinian history. So they just sort of bulldoze over that shit and try to find anything they can that looks like they could use it to show, to confirm their claim to it. In fact, I mean, Israel in Gaza has been systematically destroying archaeological sites. And some of the oldest fucking churches in the world, amongst other things.
We find Jewish coins, Jewish texts, and Jewish...
Yes, that the whale probably would get gentrified as an Airbnb. But then Jonah wouldn't have been able to afford to go into it, and that would have fucked up the whole story.
Artifacts. There isn't a single book or piece of archaeological evidence that point to a Palestinian people.
What about the fucking church in Gaza, the one that's from the year 400 CE, that's been in continuous use since then? Like, I mean, seriously, this guy. Remember, this is Mr. Facts. He's telling us the facts. And he's angry. He's actually offended that somebody would say he's racist. And all he's doing is just racist historical revisionism.
You don't like what I'm saying? Then prove me wrong. But it is much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, this is what Holocaust deniers say too. And the thing is, you don't have to dignify this. Nobody should dignify this bullshit with a refutation. It's already been done. This isn't even like the mainstream Zionist historical view. Like actual like Israeli historians would be embarrassed to claim this as their view, because you would not be taken seriously in the discipline. Now they draw fucked up conclusions. Like you have pricks like Benny Morris who will acknowledge the Nakba happened. Sorry. And his conclusion is that the Nakba was not complete. They should have finished the job because he's a ghoul.
The connection of
citation needed. I love it.
Jerusalem is based on the Jewish connection. Jesus was Jewish, and the connection of Muslims to Jerusalem is also based on the Jews. Let me explain.
Yes, do explain.
I will go even further and say that Jerusalem was never the capital of a Muslim empire. It was always Cairo, Damascus, or Baghdad. Jerusalem was mostly important to the Muslims when they were fighting against the Jews or the Christians.
I mean, it is listed as the third most holy site in Islam, but I guess that doesn't count.
Under Muslim rule, Jerusalem was often a very neglected city.
As you can tell from Haram al-Sharif and all of the amazing like medieval architecture that was built by Palestinians.
This makes
the entire fucking old city.
Jerusalem, which is mentioned some 600 times in the Jewish Bible, isn't even mentioned once in the Quran.
Well, like, do you realize that people can look these things up? And actually, if you look at the Arabic name for Jerusalem, Al-Quds, the name literally means the holy. It is a cognate with the Hebrew word kiddush, which also means like sacred or holy. Like, I mean, this is just such bullshit.
Chapter 17 of the Quran talks about the night journey of Muhammad. He ascended from Al-Aqsa, which means the most faraway mosque.
Okay, and Al-Aqsa, where is Al-Aqsa again? Like, is there a specific city that Al-Aqsa might be in? Like, for example, Jerusalem? I love how he just went on about how actually Jerusalem's never mentioned, and then he immediately talks about Al-Aqsa.
How did it come to be associated with Jerusalem?
Because that's where it fucking is.
In order to understand this, you need to go back to the Jews. The Jews had two temples on what is now known as Temple Mount. The temples were located on the holiest site for the Jews, which is the top of Mount Moriah. The first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, and the second was destroyed by the Roman Empire. 60 years after the Romans destroyed the temple, the Jews rebelled again, and the Romans changed the name of the region from Judea to Palestina.
Wait, did he just acknowledge that actually the area has been called Palestine for a really fucking long time? After acting like it was completely buck wild that anyone would suggest that there's such a thing as a Palestinian in the 19th century?
And this is how the name came to be. It was intended to disconnect the Jews from the name Judea. 700 years after the destruction of the temple, the Muslims colonized the land of Israel.
It's more accurate to actually say that the people living in that Islam, arrived there. Not long. I mean, 700 years later. We're talking about very early in the history of Islam, and a lot of the people who in Palestine who had been Jewish first converted to Christianity, and then a few hundred years later, a lot of them converted to Islam. Like, I mean...
And said that Muhammad ascended to heaven from the place where the Jewish temples stood. Now, at this point, you may well be saying, what? The Muslims believe that Muhammad ascended to heaven from the exact same spot that is the holiest site for the Jews, and this is not written in the Quran? Yes, and if you find it...
Wait. Then what the hell were you quoting? Like, what the, like, did you think about this at all? Dude, like, either you're gonna say that the Quran never mentions fucking Jerusalem, or you're gonna say that it does, and then you quote something, but you won't, but then you say it's not in the Quran, but you won't say what it's from, and it's like, okay, what the... No, I find it strange, I mean, I don't know Jerusalem, I will say. I've never been there. I don't really have any particular interest in going to Palestine until it's free, unless, like, Palestinian comrades say that my presence would somehow be useful to them, because I'm not interested in, like, assisting the entity with tourism income. Fuck that. But... I think the reason it's strange, actually, is because you've contradicted yourself in so many different ways that it's like a Mobius strip of bullshit at this point.
Strange. That's because you don't know Jerusalem. Nothing makes a
Hey,
place
Hel
holy in
Satine.
competition with another religion. The Muslim took the place which was the holiest for the Jews.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and you can find fucking coins and shit. Old coins calling it Palestine, too. Like, I mean, it's hardly, what he's saying, this is hardline right-wing Zionist propaganda for foreign consumption. Like, nobody takes this shit seriously in Israel, even, apart from, so when he says he doesn't like the government, and you're supposed to think, oh, he's one of these progressives and stuff, or something like that you keep hearing about. And no, what he's just said there is basically, I mean, they're not right-wing enough for him.
1500 years prior to the existence of Islam, and made it their third holiest place.
And then didn't mention it in the Quran.
Here is a pamphlet of the Waqf, the Muslim authorities, that say that this is the location of the Temple of King Solomon. Although what I'm saying here is very basic history,
It is basic.
There's a good chance you don't know about it.
Because you are making it up on the fly, and you aren't really editing this to make sure that what you're saying is consistent with what you said 2 minutes ago.
And I don't blame you. You hear so much about the conflict, but the media tends to forget the basics.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing the media in, like, the West is just terrible about, is they're just always giving the Palestinian view of things. You never get to hear what Israel thinks about anything.
Jerusalem was always the center of Jewish life.
No, it wasn't. Like, it still isn't. Most Jews don't live anywhere near there. It's never been it's been like a metaphorical thing. That's true, next year in Jerusalem and stuff, and it wasn't until the 19th century that anyone actually said that should be taken literally, because the idea for most of Jewish history was that could only happen when the prophet returned and shit. But I mean, then Protestants said, one way to get rid of Jews would be to have Zionism. And then reactionary bourgeois Jews said, well, yeah, let's do Zionism. Why not? But until then, to call Jerusalem the center of Jewish life in any meaningful sense, it wasn't. First of all, Jewish life has never been really monocentric, if that's the right word, or is it unicentric? I don't care. Fuck it. There have been lots of centers of Jewish life. There were, Cordoba was a center of Jewish life when actually it was still under Muslim rule. As it happens, historically, the places where it has been historically, where it's been the safest for Jews has tended to be where Muslims are running things and not, say, white Christians who are dangerous motherfuckers to live near. Worms in Germany was a major center of Jewish life. There have been lots of fucking centers of Jewish life. Jerusalem was not one of them because most Jews, through the past 2,000 years, have not lived anywhere near there.
Turn their back on Jerusalem when they pray towards Mecca, and Jews pray towards Jerusalem. When Jews get married, part of the ceremony is to say that we will never forget Jerusalem.
Which is not the same. That isn't a fucking title that isn't a title to real estate. Like, if I say I will, if I have all of my rituals end with I will never forget that wonderful beachfront condo in the Outer Banks, that doesn't mean that I get to claim it. That doesn't mean that I get ownership of it.
Have almost always lived in Jerusalem, even under the harshest conditions. Since the 13th century, the Muslims haven't allowed the Jews to pray at their holiest site, the Temple Mount, and the Jews have had to pay extra taxes and suffer harassment. They have even had to pay the Muslims a fee to pray at the Western Wall.
Okay, and but of course, Israel being such a wonderful place, they wouldn't do anything like that to Muslims with not letting them pray at Al-Aqsa, would they? Oh, except all the time, and there's a whole thing that obviously he would know about because it's been big news in Israel, is that like these right-wingers keep on talking about dynamiting Al-Aqsa, blowing it up so that they can build a new temple there. I mean...
were allowed to pray. The Islamization of Jewish sites...
Yeah, exactly. If we assumed all of that was true, it still doesn't make any fucking sense as well.
Hasn't only happened in Jerusalem. In Hebron, one of 4 cities that are...
actually, Al-Khalil. Yeah, it is for the past couple of thousand years, it has been Al-Khalil.
Glory to the Jews. There is the Cave of the Patriarchs, which according...
and I wonder if is anything else going on there? Is that perhaps a place where the indigenous population of the city have had to set up fucking nets on their pavements because the settlers are throwing fucking literal garbage at them every time they go out there and just taking pot shots at them?
According to tradition, is the place where Abraham was buried. To humiliate the Jews, Muslims didn't allow them to enter the building, and Jews were only allowed to walk up to the 7th step. Only in 1967, when Israeli liberated
Hebron. I wonder if anyone who was living there might have felt differently about that. Would have considered it something other than a liberation. Like, say, maybe the people who were fucking living there.
Were Jews allowed for the first time in 700 years to enter the second holiest place for Jews. Why do I say liberated Hebron and not conquered?
Because you're a liar. Because you systematically will ignore the reality of these things if they affect, as they affect Palestinians, because you're really fucking racist. That would be the main reason.
I will get to that in a minute.
No, I already answered it.
Now we get to the interesting part. The 19th century and Zionism.
Oh.
Jews have always migrated, or as we say in Hebrew, gone up to the land of Israel. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Jews came from all over the Jewish world, from Europe, from North Africa, from Yemen, in small numbers due to the harsh conditions, but there was always a steady movement of...
a steady movement of coming and going, though.
Jews coming to Israel. The first Zionist Congress was held in 1897, but 50 years beforehand, in the 1850s, there were more Jews than Muslims in Jerusalem. In the rest of the land, yes.
That would be really quite surprising. And at this point, I mean, he has made up so much wild shit, I'm not even going to bother to fact check that. That just seems unlikely. And it's worth noting, I mean, he just kind of mentioned the first Zionist Congress. The first Zionist Congress had to be moved because it was going to be in Vienna, and then they had to move it to Basel because the local rabbis wanted to kick anyone out who participated in it out of their congregations.
There were more Muslims, but it is important to know that even before the start of the Zionist movement, there were dozens of Jewish settlements in the land of Israel.
No, not settlements. Those were just Palestinian Jews.
In the last decades of the Ottoman Empire, as in all empires, there were lots of different groups. Some groups got bigger with time, some smaller. Some bought land, some sold land. Many European powers bought land for institutions, and some groups, mostly Germans and Americans, settled in the land of Israel to speed up the second coming of Jesus. Many different groups. None of the groups use the word Palestinian to describe themselves.
Well, no, because they weren't. You're talking about European settlers right now. Colonizers. Obviously, they wouldn't be using the term to describe themselves.
The first Zionist Congress took place in 1897. The Zionist movement was a national movement, not a colonialist or an imperialist movement.
Yeah, see, that's funny because, see, when you actually look at the words that Zionists used for the first, 60 years of the movement to describe what they were doing, they did call it colonialist and imperialist. It was only after decolonization started to happen post-World War II when colonization started to take on a deserved negative connotation that suddenly Zionists started to think the better of using the term.
But a national one of many. This was the age of the fall of empires, the German Empire, the Austrian...
No, actually. I mean, we're talking about the late 19th century. The German Empire only just started to form in the late 19th century. Falling apart was something that it would take it a few decades. I mean, we're talking 1897, not World War I here. He's compressing these things together in all sorts of weird ways.
Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire, and of the rise of national movements. And the Zionist movement was the national movement of the Jews.
No, not exactly. It started out as an anti-Semitic movement of Protestants. Then some right-wing Jews decided to adopt it and make common cause with anti-Semitic Protestants and anti-Semitic Catholics. They weren't picky. There were other national movements of Jews. There were actual Jewish liberation movements, and Zionism was all about rejecting those.
It is as simple as that. In the first half of the 20th century, millions of people moved from one place to another to create nation-states. What's special about the Jews is that they never stole or used violence to take any land in the land of Israel.
Really? Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing about the way that Israel takes land from Palestinians, it's how non-violent it is. It's why they don't have any weapons. They have never had any weapons in Israel. They would never do violence. They're total pacifists.
I'm always getting comments from Muslims and pro-Palestinians about Jews stealing the land from the local Arabs.
That's so unfair. Just because it happened doesn't mean you have to point it out. Don't you understand that this is his world-building channel?
Here is a challenge for you. Give me the name of one village that the Jews stole from the Arabs.
Okay. Majd al-Ashqalan.
From the 7th century.
Jaffa. Akka. Shall I go on? There are lots of them, actually. More every day, because as he's saying this, and surely he's well aware of it, I mean, Palestinians are being kicked out of one village after another.
When the Arab Caliphate colonized the land of Israel until 1947, when the Arabs started a war to wipe out the Jews.
No. I like how, Palestine gets invaded and Palestine gets to be the one who started the war.
From the year 636 till 1947, not a single square foot was stolen by the Jews. Again, if you don't like what I'm saying, then prove me wrong.
Like, I mean, it is so fucking trivial to prove him wrong. And also, stop saying the Jews. You're talking about the Zionists. Most of us have never lived there. Most of us are never going to live there. And actually, my dude, if you check out your airport sometime, the departure lounges are a little bit crowded lately.
Give me the names of villages that Jews stole prior to the War of Independence. On the other hand, I can give you...
Wait, okay, so prior to the Nakba. That's an interesting cutoff point.
Lots of names of Jewish villages that Arabs, or Palestinians if you will, destroyed before 1948. Take Hebron for example. Jews lived in Hebron for hundreds of years. In 1929, the Arabs, not 1 or 10, but whole gangs of Arabs, murdered 70 Jews, and the ancient Jewish settlement had to be abandoned.
Well, yeah, but remember that, okay, that riot actually did happen. That's true. But we have to remember that if there are subsequently more of a group of people, that means that there could not have actually been anything bad that happened to them before that. So, because he said there are more Palestinians in all of historic Palestine now than in 1948, that means that there could not have been a Nakba. So, there are certainly more Zionist colonizers in the Al-Khalil area than there were in 1929, so clearly nothing bad happened to them there.
Until it was brought back into Jewish hands in 1967. You want more names of Jewish villages that were abandoned because of Arab violence? Here are some more. Many were rebuilt.
It's amazing how many of these were actually examples of villages started by Zionist colonizers, specifically on Palestine, specifically near Palestinian villages in order to start shit. Like Tel Hai, like Metula.
Built after a few years. The Arabs used violence against Jewish civilians in the land of Israel many years before the occupation and many years before the land of Israel was established.
Wait, okay, now all of a sudden it's many years before the land of Israel was established. You've been talking about the land of Israel as if it was always fucking there, and now all of a sudden it's many years before the land of Israel was established. Like, make up your mind, my dude. What do words mean anything to you?
And by the way, they didn't only use violence against the Jews. Christians suffered as well. Remember the German and American settlements I told you about? They suffered as well.
Yes, they were invaders. They shouldn't have been there. They should have fucked off. Nobody asked them to come.
The family of John Steinbeck, the American novelist, had a farm outside Jaffa, or at least they had it until Arabs broke in and murdered Steinbeck's great uncle and sexually assaulted his wife and his daughter. Here is an interesting
evidence needed.
Anecdote. Two other great American novelists, Mark Twain and Herman Melville, visited the land of Israel. And like hundreds of other pilgrims, they wrote about how neglected the land was.
This is so funny because he's using what he's doing here is actually using, remember the hoax I talked about earlier, the From Time Immemorial? So what From Time Immemorial does is it takes quotes, in particular from Mark Twain, about the state of Palestine. It joins a half of a sentence and another half of a sentence that have 89 whole pages in between them with no ellipsis, as if it's continuous text, in order to omit all his descriptions of Palestinian life in Palestine.
And many wrote about how violent the local Arabs were.
Wow, you mean they didn't like being invaded? They didn't like being colonized? That's so gauche.
From 1970 till 1948, the British and the French were in control of the Middle East. The Jews blamed the British for being pro-Arab, and the Arabs blamed the British for being pro-Jewish.
Well, yes, because the British Empire imposed a Zionist colonial settlement on them without ever asking them if they wanted it.
I will tell it as it was. The British were...
Oh, he's gonna tell it like it was. That would be a refreshing change. He hasn't been doing much of that.
Or pro-British. They had two main interests in the region: to have oil flowing from Iraq to the port of Haifa, and to ensure the Suez Canal remained open. And
Oh, Haifa is another example of Palestinian land that was stolen by the Zionist colonizers.
Because both of these interests lay in the hands of the Arabs, they were pro-Arab. Today it is very fashionable to be against colonial powers, and of course they did do a lot of damage, but I find it absurd that pro-Palestinians are anti-colonial.
Okay, where is he going with this?
As it was the Roman Empire that gave the name.
Oh, yes, fuck the Roman imperialists. What, we're doing a Life of Brian now? Romanes eun domus.
Palestine to the area, and the British Empire that gave it its border.
Now, like, do you think the Romans made up the word Palestine? Or did they perhaps do a Romanization of a word that was being used for the place?
When the British and the French drew lines on maps, they invented two nations that never existed before, the Palestinians and the Jordanians. Another fact that is often
Well, don't forget the Israelis. They never existed before.
overlooked is that pro-Palestinians are always talking about Jewish immigrants coming from Europe. No one talks about the Arabs who came to the land of Israel.
Because they were already there.
Hundreds of thousands of Arabs from Egypt, Syria, and other places entered the land of Israel in the 1930s.
Oh, this is the Joan Peters hoax. He is just repeating the Joan Peters hoax, which again is like literally all you have to do to see what bullshit it is take like a random citation and check like a random quote and check it against what Peters says it says against the actual original source, and she just makes shit up. Like she will ellipse out words like not.
And 40s to work for the British and are now seen as native Palestinians.
Yeah, this is complete bullshit. And I mean, again, this is something like even like mainstream Israeli historians don't take this bullshit seriously. Like when Peters' book came out, which is what he is quoting here, this is all coming from Peters. It was not. I mean, it was laughed at in Israel. Because, like, Israeli historians knew the score, Zionists knew the score, like, they had, because trying to work out a way to deal with the fact that the land was already inhabited was something that Zionists had, couldn't just couldn't just, like, sort of stick their head in the sand about. They were talking about it from the start. Yeah, exactly. This is all, it's a book called Joan Peters, and actually Norman Finkelstein, his first big thing was, he was a PhD student at the time, and he took a summer off to just spend the whole time in the library going through all of Peters' citations. And basically he had the hardest time getting his findings published because nobody wanted to admit that it was a hoax. Nobody wanted to look at what he found about her citations because the who's who of U.S. intellectuals had blurbed this thing and talked about what a revelation it was. Also, ich find's nicht ironisch, der ist ja Zionist, ja, was wird er denn sonst sagen? Er will kein freies Palästina.
It is hard to estimate the number.
Ja, also ein freies Palästina hätte ja eigentlich nichts für ihn übrig.
Arabs who entered the land of Israel between 1917 to 1947 to work for the British as the borders were open, but the number is in the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, and one of the most just chutzpahous things that Peters does is she arbitrarily designates like geographical areas in a way that she can make it look like these numbers were recent. There's a whole thing. If you want to see Finkelstein's dissection of it, before he began his cringe arc, which continues to this day, it's an Image and Reality of the Israel-Palestine Conflict, one of his earlier books. There's a whole chapter, possibly 2 chapters on it. I highly recommend it. Because he leaves no stone on top of another.
Probably about half of the population of Gaza came to the land of Israel during the British Mandate time.
No. That is actually what we would call a bullshit that he's doing here. It's interesting that he uses half, because half is roughly the number of the percentage of the population of Gaza that ended up being expelled from their homes in the rest of Palestine, in what is now the south of Israel, between 1948 and 1952.
Their last names usually hint towards the actual origin of the family. I find it absurd that people like my great-grandmother, who came to Israel from Eastern Europe...
Yeah. This motherfucker just got here. You know, his family just got here, and he's gonna complain. And he's gonna just like start calling other people who've been there all along blow-ins. Like, shut the fuck up.
The 1920s, after dreaming about the Jewish homeland for generations, are seen as white colonialists, while Egyptians who came to work for the British in 1945 are seen as native Palestinians.
God. I mean, and he keeps on... I mean, it's wild that somebody will just lie. I mean, I don't know. Lie might not be the right word, because it is entirely possible he believes this bullshit. Although, that would make him unusual. Because, like, Peter's book, which is what he is very clearly relying on here, even if he won't mention it. Because if he mentioned it, then you would look it up and you would find that it's a hoax. But that was not taken seriously in Israel. They said, you know, it was basically, yeah, maybe this might be good as propaganda abroad, but other than that, it sucks. I mean, obviously, it's bullshit. We all know that there were people here before we got there, because there were long Zionist debates about what to do about those people. With Jabotinsky saying, of the far-right, like, revisionists, saying that obviously there's not going to be an accommodation because we want to take the land that they're on, and why in the hell would they ever want to give it up? But I just noticed the time, and it is time to wrap up. So I hope, thanks for joining in. I hope you enjoyed the stream, and if you enjoy the stream and you can spare a little bit, all contributions to my Patreon are always welcome, as are tips. They will also help keep supporting the Inessa Armand translation project. So if you can, it's appreciated, and if you can't, don't sweat it. I understand it's a shitty time for most people. Have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow.